So good afternoon, everyone. For those who are here in the UK, and good morning for those who are in Brazil. My name is Arthur Galamba. I am one of the coordinators of the STEM Education Hub. It's a pleasure for me to welcome everyone. Lots of people from Brazil and the UK. We are expecting to attend this event. It's a pleasure really to welcome the specialists that are going to present in this event today. An event that is going to be addressing and comparing the realities of teaching languages or the learning of language in Brazil and in England. So it's going to be a rich discussion, a really interesting presentations from Simon and from Andrea, and also we have Emilio here who is going to do the moderation. Let me just say a little bit more about them before I can hand over back to Emilio. Okay. I mean, Simon is a great colleague of mine here at the PGC at King's College London. He's a program director of our program, and he's also a specialist. He's a linguistic specialist in language education. So he's got like a strong grasp of language pedagogy, and he will address the complexities and policy nuances and curriculum dynamics that impact language education in England. Then we're going to listen to Andrea in her presentation. Andrea is an associate professor at Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, she's going to draw on her extensive linguistic and educational background. And we will also discuss some key concepts in school-based language teaching. And then we're also very lucky to have Emilio Abularaka from the British Council, drawing from his experience in education management. He will help this conversation to get going. He can ask questions to the panelists, but also will be able to choose some questions coming from the audience. So those of you who are in the audience and want to ask questions at any time, please use the chat to write down your questions. We really welcome those questions coming from you. Okay, I hope you enjoy this event. The event is going to be recorded and going to be available to be watched later in our website. And I'm looking forward to it. So thank you. Welcome, Simon. Welcome, Andrea. And welcome, Emilio. And Emilio, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Professor Galamba, thank you very much. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to have you online. My name is Emilio Bulac. I'm a project manager for English programs at the British Council, and we're based here in São Paulo, Brazil. Well, the British Council supports peace and prosperity by building connections and understanding trust between people in the UK and countries worldwide. Our aim is to build bonds of trust and understanding between people all over the world. And the STEM Education Hub, it's a partnership between the British Council Brazil and King's College London. And we're very thrilled to present this event, comparing realities in different contexts of school language learning and teaching in Brazil and in England. So as Professor Galamba already said, in an increasingly fast-paced and globalized world, language skills are becoming more and more valuable. But how do teaching cultures differ between these two countries, Brazil and the UK? We are trying to foster educational exchange here today between these two countries. And the STEM Education Hub is promoting this engaging conversation with two experts in the field. We're going to start off today with Dr. Coffey's intervention. So please, Dr. Simon Coffey, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emilio. Sorry, I hope you didn't mind me doing the screen share while you were talking. It's just to save time, that's all, because I was worried about being able to find it and stuff. So thank you very much for that nice introduction, and to Arthur as well, my esteemed colleague, who's our head of science education here at King's. So thanks very much, everyone, for organising this, for allowing me the opportunity to exchange perspectives in this format. It's wonderful in a way, and thanks to technology for that, that I've been able to reach out to have this meeting with Andrea in Brazil. It's fantastic. I've always enjoyed international dialogue anyway, and for me that's a sort of key remit in a way of language teachers. I think language teaching and having international dialogue really go together. For me, it's about fostering a mindset of openness and curiosity, and that begins obviously with dialogue. So I was very happy to make this connection with Andrea Mattos. When I was invited by the British Academy to convene the encounter, I reached out to a mutual friend of ours, actually, Lalu, who is a colleague of Andrea's, and she's a professor of literacy education at the Federal University of Minas Gerais. So she put me in contact. So I say that because it shows in a way how nice these international dialogues, these international connections have a sort of take on a sort of life of their own. So I'm here actually at King's today, although I'm in my office at the moment. I've got downstairs, in a room downstairs, we have our new crop, if you like, a new group of our new languages teachers who have just arrived. It's week 3 of our programme here at King's. We started early in September, and they've been doing lots of induction work here at university. And next Wednesday is D-Day. They'll be beginning their teaching practice in school. So they're all getting geared up towards that. It's very exciting for me every year. I've been doing this now for many years, and I always get a real buzz from getting to know new groups and see the young people entering the profession. I really enjoy working with languages teachers in particular. I think there's something, I guess everyone thinks that of their subject. I think there's something very special about languages teachers. Our relationships to our students, making a difference, enjoying our engagement with languages and cultures that we love. We had this morning an exchange where people were teaching each other bits of languages that they didn't know. For example, we had Italian and other European languages, but also Tamil, which was, we were learning how to write our names in Tamil. And we really encourage a spirit of multilingualism and diversity. It's very important. For me, language teaching and being in my job as an applied linguist and working in teacher education, but at every level, in a sense, or every domain of language teaching, it's always about being in community. Communities of teachers, communities of research here at university, and transnational, if you like, communities of teaching and research as well. I think it's a wonderful thing, in fact, to be a languages teacher. For me personally, it's given me a lot. I wanted to speak a little bit about myself and my life as a languages person. That was the title of a book by Colin Evans. It was a very influential book for me, written in the 1980s, which used biography. It was the first book I know of to look at biographies of language teachers, or the experience of language teachers from a biographical, autobiographical perspectives. And he called the book Language People, I think. And so me as a language person, what does that mean? Obviously, people think you've got a set of competencies and that you transmit these in a classroom, but we know, of course, that it's a lot more than that. We have these identity labels of teacher, of linguist, of, in my case, a Europhile, although I'm trying to decolonize myself now and not just say Europhile, but more global cosmopolitan or something. We could also say things about ourselves being a sort of learner of a particular type. In my case, I think I'm a bit of a dreamer, and I think that's a good thing. Language teaching has given me so much in my life on many levels, emotionally, materially, certainly, professionally, in terms of my intellectual development. It's really given me so much. I've been around now for about 35 years since I started language teaching, and I really love it, and I love the opportunities it gives me. But it's not just a personal solo project. Becoming a teacher, becoming a novice teacher, or at whatever level, is about participating in community, participating in what you might call communities of practice. That's a buzzword sociologists use. It comes from Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger, communities of practice. So in my research at PhD level, I was talking to language learners, telling me about their history of language learning. So it's an autobiographical method. And sort of without realizing it, people end up talking about the different communities they've been in. They may be professional communities, or they may be communities of effect. This is an illustration, if you like. I did just a bit of light relief in my thesis of somebody telling me about their language learning project, I called it. That was the title I gave it, language learning project, in the sense of it being an autobiographical or identity project. And naturally, you're going to invoke stories of your own school learning. People love to regale us with stories of their favorite teacher or their worst teacher, their scary teacher. They tend to use quite cartoony language to do that with, actually. It's quite funny. So there's already a community of practice. There's a community going on in school. People have in their family life as well the different influences of family and friends, different sets of communities. So what motivates people to become a teacher, what motivates people to become a language learner, in this case, is not really, it seems like an individual choice, but it's structured, it's shaped by the discourses of the communities that we participate in. People spoke a lot in their stories around trips abroad, quite naturally, and about their adult home life, and then about their professional life. So in a way, in order to maintain this language learning project over time, to sustain this, it takes sort of successful integration in different communities of practice. But the communities of practice are not just there as static entities that we just participate in as if we go through a turnstile. They're loose constellations in a way that we hook up with to a certain degree, we join, we can reshape as well. So we're active members, we're active participants in communities of practice. There's a sort of engagement between the individual and the social. I've got a photograph on the screen of Brian Street. He was my PhD supervisor and a former colleague of ours here at King's. He's no longer with us. But I wanted to pay tribute to the impact he had on my work, and Andrea knows Brian as well. So he's our common connection in a way, but I wanted to pay tribute to him. A number of us recently were invited to contribute to a memorial article for Brian in Anthropology and Education journal. And it really made me take stock of the impact he'd had on my thinking. When I joined King's to do my PhD, I was interested in motivation to become, to learn languages. And I was going to follow quite a traditional, not traditional, but quite a prevalent, let's say, model of psychological sort of perspective of getting people to fill in questionnaires. Brian helped me see, I think, because he was an anthropologist, he really helped me situate language learning much more broadly into this notion of communities, or figured worlds is the metaphor I used in my thesis. So I guess the question I would have to language learners is, or teachers as well, is thinking to help them think about what communities they inhabit, what communities they wish entry to, in a way, because novice teachers now starting in schools, part of what the challenge for them is, but it's a nice challenge, but part of the process is for them to learn new ways of being in a community. But one of the things I think that's great about university-based teacher education routes is that we develop a critical awareness in our students. We want them to be aware of the rules of the game, in a sense, in communities, because communities are not only shaped by participants, they're also shaped by broader ideological movers. So I need probably to keep an eye on time, otherwise I'll go over. So coming back to the context of modern languages here in England, Well, we often use the acronym in England. Still, tend to use this acronym MFL. MFL means Modern Foreign Languages. That's still the prevalent jargon we use, even though now more formally our curriculum is called Languages, because it wants to include classical languages, and it also, these terms like, that's why we wouldn't say necessarily modern languages, but also the word foreign has become quite loaded now in many respects. It's become quite othering. So some people will balk a little bit at this use of the word foreign. I was interested when I was in the States for a conference recently that they were people in my role, in a sense, were now using the term world languages. That's been around for quite a while now in the States. Instead of modern or foreign languages, they're using world languages. So we're encouraged now to use languages, just languages on its own. So what's the situation of MFL or modern foreign languages in England? Well, the big scoop, obviously, is that we're an Anglophone country. We have English as our international languages. That means that we operate in a completely different context from the countries where English is the most taught school language. We do not have that. We teach English, of course, as mother tongue or national language in schools, but we don't have that challenge of skilling people up to teach English as to speak English as a foreign language. So that's that poses a huge challenge in a way for us, because the more English gains in sort of global supremacy, the more redundant some people would say learning another language is. So a lot of the traditional motivations for learning languages, such as travel, going on holiday, work, things like that, we still use the same arguments, but we have to broaden in a way our rationale for why we think languages are important. The language classroom in England needs to be a much broader intercultural, if you like, an interlingual space. So we're teaching, rather than just worrying about people's proficiency, communicative, functional proficiency in a particular language, we're really teaching a skill set or a mindset, in a sense, of openness and curiosity to language learning. In the European context, which despite Brexit, we're still in Europe geographically and culturally, I feel, but that maybe is contentious to say as well. But there is a Council of Europe objective to have all countries teaching at least 2 foreign languages in the school system. This is called the Barcelona objective. It's been around for about 20 years now. So most school systems in Europe have their national language plus usually English, but plus a first foreign language and a second foreign language. We don't have that luxury in England, I'm afraid, and even though in Scotland they are implementing that framework, we're not doing that in England, where there's a real problem of drop-off for languages for us. So I guess why I'm saying this is we need to really step up our rationale and our motivation for learning languages in this country. We cannot use the same arguments or the same rationale that we may have used 40 years ago. They don't really wash now in an age of global English. So I believe that languages as a curriculum subject still has, more than ever in a way, a vital role to play, but it needs to change. Am I okay for time? Okay, good. So the point is that we know there's a crisis, and often when people talk about languages in England, they always preface it with this terrible story of doom and gloom about there's a crisis going on because numbers in post-compulsory take-up of languages have dropped off. However, we're an extremely multilingual society here. I mean, I'm based in London, and half the children in London, to use crude figures, speak other languages at home. So we're in an extremely cosmopolitan setting. So in a way, it gives a sort of false narrative to say that English are all monolinguals and we don't speak other languages. There is a huge amount of multilingualism and multiculturalism going on, for sure. So we need to take that into account when we're designing our curriculum and our lessons, even our lessons, yeah, down at that level. We can't just assume that we're teaching to this blanket of English monolinguals. It's not the case anymore. Yeah, okay, so a point I wanted to make here was just to cite very briefly some work a colleague of mine did, comparing some textbooks in Germany and some textbooks in the UK. And, and this analysis showed very clearly that the UK textbooks showed different representations of Europe from what the textbooks in Germany did. The reason I think it's important is that there is a narrative, if you like, of isolationism in England, which isn't always helped by the fact that our education system is different from other systems. We drive on the left for a start and other systems don't. I'm not saying we should change, but we're very much seen as the odd man out in Europe. And when we ask children what it feels like for them to be in Europe, they don't relate to it. They don't feel European. And that's partly what we do at school and partly our role as language teachers, but it's much broader than that. It's part of our socialization process in a way. So we have quite a job to do, I think, to get people to break out of this insularity that in a way I think has led to Brexit as a concrete example. So we have, okay for another 5 minutes or so? Right, we have, thank you, good. We have at the moment a new curriculum being imposed upon us in schools and in university teacher education programs. It's coming down the line. There's an unprecedented intervention at the moment, top-down intervention from government in our system, which has traditionally not been very interventionist, actually. We haven't traditionally had centralized policy, centralized system, but now it's coming. And the government, or the DFE, our Department for Education, is imposing a particular model of learning. Much of it makes sense, and much of it I sign up to, but as an sort of that is the model rather than that's part of the story. So one of the remits in our discussion earlier about how we were going to do this was I suggested I pick up some key concepts which are doing the rounds now. They're not new, but they're being enshrined, if you like, into curriculum. Self-efficacy. Those of you who've studied anything about motivation theory will know this term. Self-efficacy, it's been around for quite a while now. It's Decky and Ryan. The government are using it a lot, these terms, in their documents to justify the changes in our curriculum. Self-efficacy is the principle that if you do something well, it's a virtuous circle, it propels you on to the next step. Well, a group of experts, and I cite the journal there, you're welcome to go off and read that if you're interested in it, contested a lot of the claims made in the research review by the government recently, by the government arm inspector called the Ofsted, saying that it was only partially representing what self-efficacy means, because self-efficacy isn't supposed to simply be an individual behavioral chain reaction, a positive outcome, success leads to success. It's also socially situated. There's quite a nice detailed critique of that by Suzanne Graham in the special issue, which I recommend anyone who's interested reads. Similarly, the government like to say that their research is backed by cognitive science. Cognitive science, of course, is a very broad, woolly term. It doesn't in a way mean anything of itself, in and of itself. So again, I would invite people to read this special issue, which a lot of the research actually cited by the government themselves has been contested by the experts that they cite. We're now moving to a model in the UK curriculum, or English curriculum, I should say, because Scottish curriculum is different, in the English curriculum of having a prescribed word list, a narrowly prescribed bank of high frequency words. They cite often the work of James Milton in this, but James Milton has taken issue with the way his work's been cited. Again, I invite you to go and check what he says about that in the in this special issue. I think I haven't got time to go into huge detail about that now, but there is quite a lot of the claims that they make that they're basing the curriculum on, which are refuted. It's not to say a lot of what they say doesn't make sense in part, but it's not the whole story. For example, the idea of cognitive load, which has been around for a long time and it's very popular now, the idea that we have a working memory and a longer term memory. So they suggest that we, for example, use 7 items of vocabulary. For me, the number in and of itself is meaningless without a sort of emotional connection to words or without a broader motivation for words. My catchword in a lot of the work I do is connection, connectivity. I think the words need to connect, yes, to prior learning, but also they need to have some form of social or personalized meaning to the learner. So what do I mean by connection? Connectivity. Well, connectivity goes in all different directions. The individual who turns up in the classroom, the student, needs to feel that their experience, their knowledge of the world, their frames of reference is somehow validated or recognized in the new material that's being introduced. There needs to be a connection between the language that they're receiving as input and their sort of emotional, if you like, state of being. So people often argue, and it's quite a classical sort of model, that you do the language, learn the basics, then you learn some content afterwards. The nitty-gritty of the language comes first, and then you can branch off and do some nice, interesting content. Well, in a way, it can't really work like that, in our system at least. A, because they have such a small amount of contact time that we would all wait until they're already have left school before they've got the basics for language, but also it's needless. We think that you can do hand in hand interesting content and with basic language. So the skill for us is to ensure that language content is interesting or motivating in a way without the limited proficiency, linguistic proficiency, being a barrier. So some ways we could do that, for example, and this is just a simple example to give you as the sort of thing that we might see, is using the notion of flags. We teach very basic, most people start their modern language learning in England, they've done some at primary and then they carry on at secondary school, high school, age 11, they might do colours, for example. If they're learning French, they typically learn the French flag, maybe the Canadian flag or Belgian flag or Swiss flag as well. So many of the children in our classrooms here in London know other flags. They know flags that we don't. And with very simple vocabulary, they can tell us about flags that mean something to them. This is a very fundamental form of connection, using very simple language. I could demonstrate in French, but I think not everyone on the call would get that. So you could quite easily, after you've learned the colours, say there are 3 bands of colour. There are 4 bands of colour. This is the flag of, then name the country. This sounds a very simple thing to do that a 10 or 11-year-old child can do. It's very validating. It's very validating. Otherwise, it's just complete input, new input, without them appropriating the language in their own way. And in a way, I throw the challenge out now to people on the call to identify which of these flags belong to which country or which state. Answers on a postcard. They love telling us about something about their background, and flags and different types of food is a way of doing that. That's what we mean by connection. It's connecting some new input, connecting new language with connecting their frames of reference, not just their frames of knowledge reference, but their frames of emotional reference, what has an emotional resonance for them. I think that's very important. I always go back to one of my favorite language scholars. You may have heard the name Claire Cramch, who I admire tremendously. She wrote many years ago, and it really stuck with me, that teachers can do what they want in the classroom. We can't always predict by our lesson plan. We can't always predict what's going to resonate exactly with particular students. I've just been reading over the last few days lovely little biographical reflections that my students wrote about their own experience in school. And they're very moving, actually, and really wonderful to read. They all took different things away from their lessons, different teachers, different activities, some things stuck in their minds, some images stuck in their minds, some particular activities. We can't predict it. All we can do, I think, is with our best integrity, with our best intentions, we can set up a context of dialogue, a context of trying to connect the different interests and different emotional pulses that go on. And of course, our role is to facilitate that linguistically. And these little epiphanies that are experienced along the way, as Claire Cramp says, are often totally beyond our awareness as teachers, awareness and control, but they do happen. They do happen. And I think it's important for teachers to maintain a critical awareness about the way our communities of practice are being shaped, because they're often being shaped for ideological or political purposes. And I think it's quite important for us to be aware of that, to focus on the pleasure in a way that can happen in classrooms, the enjoyment. I really am into enjoyment in a big sense. Okay, that's it from me, really. I have lots of research publications, which I didn't want to bore you all with, but I'm very happy to pass any on to you. If anyone would like to contact me, if you're interested in any particular areas. One other area of connectivity that I didn't mention is connecting historical perspective with current perspectives, because I think there's a tendency for applied linguistics and language education to be a little bit ahistorical. So that's another line of my research. Anyway, that's it for now, I think. I'm very happy to take questions, of course. And yeah, I'll pass now, I think, directly over to Andrea. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, for this very inspiring presentation. And I really could connect to several of the things you said. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes, okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you, Simon, and other people here in this presentation for inviting me. And I also want to mention Lalu, who is the common connection between Simon and me. So that's how Simon got to know about myself and how I was invited. So thank you, Lalu. Of course, she's not here, but I want to say that I'm pleased to be here, and I thank her for putting me in contact with Dr. Simon. I also want to thank my colleague Patricia Costa Leite, who is here with us today. Thank you, Patricia, for coming to this presentation. So my presentation will be a little bit different. I'll try to talk more about the way education really is in Brazil, because I thought it would be, it is a completely different system from what people are most used to in the UK or Europe or in the US or Canada, which are the most, let's say, knowledgeable areas where English or references, let's say, for English speaking and in English teaching and learning. I'll just start saying who I am in general. I won't take very long in this. So I have a PhD in linguistic and literary studies from the University of São Paulo here in Brazil. I've worked my whole life in applied linguistics, which is, in fact, a very broad area and also very interdisciplinary. So when I started as an MA student back in the end of the last century, 1990 something, I already started working with teacher education and specifically English teacher education. So my MA thesis is or was at that time already on English teacher education. But I was basically working with teachers' narratives of identity and beliefs and things like that. So it was at that time, it was something that was starting to become a focus of research in Brazil. But of course, nowadays, there are so many other possibilities in applied linguistics. And I've done a lot of micro research on specific topics, such as the big area now called affect. I've done some research on affect in language learning, specifically focused on hope in language learning and teaching. And I'll talk more about that towards the end. I am now an associate professor at the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, UFMG. And as Simon said, we use this term languages because we don't teach only modern languages like English, French, Spanish, and German, and Italian also, but we also teach Latin and Greek. And we are starting to have a few people interested in Asian languages such as Chinese, Mandarin. We also teach Portuguese as a mother tongue. We speak Portuguese in Brazil, and we teach Portuguese as an additional language as well, because nowadays we get a lot of immigrants in this area, in Brazil, in my area. I have some connections in Canada. I took part of my PhD research. I did part of my PhD research in Canada in 2009. And then I went back for a postdoc, a one-year postdoc program at the University of Manitoba in 2014. I've been coming and going from Canada every 1 or 2 years. So I do have a lot of connections there. I've been to England only twice, but I hope now we can, me and Simon can have more projects together, and who knows, I can go back to England and visit some of you. In terms of my research interests, as I said, I've been working with this big area now called affect, but specifically in the area of how hope influences language teachers and their attitudes and beliefs in the classroom. Lately, basically after my PhD, I started working with critical, very much inspired by the work of Professor Brian Street in terms of new literacy studies. In terms of research, I work basically with narrative research and narratives as a method of research. As I said, most of my work is in the big area of teacher education and specifically English teacher education. Since 2018, I've been working with this new idea in applied linguistics, the concept of post-memory. I'm not going to talk much about that, but in the end, if we have time, I can at least give you an idea of what that is, if you're interested. Just to introduce my talk, you may know that Brazil is a huge country. In this image here on your right, I guess, you see Brazil inside the map of Latin America. So Brazil is this big blue area, and the gray area is the rest of Latin America, or in fact here it's the rest of South America. Latin America is not really a geographical term, but a term that refers to the languages that are spoken in the so-called Latin America, which where only Spanish and Portuguese are spoken, and a little bit of French also. So Brazil is also big in itself. You see here the map of Brazil. We are divided in 5 regions, geographical regions: the north, the northeast, the central west, the southeast, where I am, and the south. There are 26 states and 27 federal units, including Brasilia, the capital, right here. And we don't have the final numbers of the last census, which was delayed because of the pandemics, but the last number that we have is something around 212 million, 212 million people in Brazil. Numbers is very difficult in a foreign language. Sorry about that. So a little bit more in terms of how huge Brazil is, and now in relation to schools. So we are 179 or around that 1,000 schools in Brazil, in the whole country, more than 2 million school teachers, more than 47 million students, but the minimum wage for teachers, for school teachers in Brazil is just $251 US. I don't know how much that would be in pounds, but if you have an idea of how much the US dollar is in terms of the pound, you can know that this is really very little for people who work really hard during their whole career. So here I'll give you like a snapshot of how the Brazilian education system is organized. So
Andrea,
we have
Andrea,
yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I think you need to forward your slides on.
Oh, really?
I'm still on slide 1. Maybe it's just me.
Is it? Do you see it going back and forth?
No.
Well, I don't know what to do then.
Okay, don't worry. It's fine.
It would be good to see. Are you still in my cover page?
Yes,
cover
and
slide?
I think
Really?
the issue is when you pressed on to start the PowerPoint, it didn't get started. So we're still seeing the PowerPoint itself. We're not just seeing your slide. So maybe if you exit, yeah.
Do you see it going? Do you see it going up now?
No.
No. Oh, I really don't know how to do. How should I start?
Yeah, maybe
I
need
should
to restart
Professor Mattos?
PowerPoint, close PowerPoint.
I
and
put it
restart
in presentation mode.
If you go to presentation of slides.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think if you come out of presentation mode and then come back in, that might help.
I'm so sorry. You could have said that earlier.
Don't worry. I wasn't sure if it was just me. Don't worry.
I mean, I don't know about other people, but I'm also still seeing the.
Well, it's probably everybody. You don't see the map of Brazil?
No, I'm seeing your screen. Like it seems to be frozen. I think we were all figuring out
here
whether
that
it was
everybody who can start sharing when someone.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Just the normal life now of
Yeah, of
it allows
using
us to do.
technology, right?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's amazing because it allows us all to be here today, but also, of course, there are then these little issues. But don't worry about it. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Andrea, if you stop sharing and then start sharing again, maybe that will help. Yeah, that's it. And then let's
It
start
has
again.
stopped sharing now.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try again. Share. I'll start here. So do you see my screen?
Yes. Now go to
Yes.
presentation of slide. If you go to presentation of slide.
Do you see the map of Brazil?
No.
No.
It's still on the initial page.
Could you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We got it.
Yeah, okay, so I will not use the presentation mode, so you can see my slides.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And you will also be able to see the list of slides on your left, okay? So this is what I was talking about. This is the map of Brazil and Latin America, and the map, I'll try to open up and make it bigger. So this is the map of Brazil and the 5 regions, okay? So I'll skip to this slide. This is where I was talking about. This is what I was talking about when I discovered that you couldn't see my presentation. Do you see the Brazilian educational system? Yeah.
Yes, Dr.
Okay, great. Sorry. So we have all levels of education. We have the preschool education, elementary school, and high school, which is basically the same levels that you have, I believe, in Britain. But comparing with the US system and Canadian system, which are the systems I am more familiar with, preschool education is basically what we call nursery and kindergarten. From 0 to 3 years old, kids are around up to 3 years old. And then we have also preschool from 5 and 6 years old. At this level, we have private and public schools, but public schools are around 70% of all the schools that teach preschool, that have preschool education. At this level, it is also the level where the city, like the city manages the preschool education all over the country. Okay. Then at elementary education level, we also have private and public schools, and around 80 to 85% of schools are public. So you see that most schools in Brazil are usually public, although we do have a large number of private schools all over the country. Elementary schools is education is divided in 2 phases, which we call initial years from 6 to 7 years old, and final years from 11 to 14 years old. Elementary school is also managed by cities all over the country. Sorry. Then at the level of high school, again, we have private and public schools, and around 87% of the schools are public. This level is managed by the states mostly. Kids or teenagers are from 15 to 17 years old, although in public schools, they may be a little older than that. We also have a big system of technical schools, which are mostly federal schools. They are run by the federal government, and they are in fact elite schools in Brazil, like they are really good schools, but they are public. For the rest of the system, from preschool to high school, when we have this difference between private and public schools, although the majority of the schools are run by the cities and the states, private schools are usually better than public schools. In terms of students, 99% of our school children aged six years or up to 14 years old attend school. So almost 100% of children and teenagers in Brazil do attend school. We have laws that enforce that. Parents are forced to put their children in school. They can be even jailed if their children are not going to school. And then we have what we call higher education and graduate studies, which are at university level. And here, the situation completely changes. We do have some private universities, but the big majority of universities in Brazil are public. Most of them are federal university. We also have state universities, but they're not so many. In terms of quality, in this case, the federal universities are the very best in Brazil. The university that I work for is a federal university. It's the biggest and the best federal university in Brazil, the University of Minas Gerais, and it's the third best university in Brazil. The only two other universities that are better are the University of São Paulo and the University of Campinas, both of them in the state of São Paulo and run by the state of São Paulo. And then at the graduate level, we again have private and public schools, but again, most of the schools are federal, most of the courses are federal, and at the private system, the courses are really very expensive. So just to give you a picture of how schools look like in Brazil, this in terms of private and in the private and the public system, this would be a private school, very neat, light, and clean. And children can work in several ways. They are free to collaborate. This might be the teacher or a monitor. Also, in terms of how they look like from the outside, this would be a possibility. This is just an example, but many private schools look like that. In terms of public schools, they don't have so many resources. This is a typical public school classroom in my area. Most of the classrooms are green like that. And you see we have a blackboard and desks for the students, a desk for the teacher, but not more than that, not much more than that. But in poorer areas in Brazil, we also have classrooms that look like this, like in the Northeast and the north of Brazil. We do have classes that are, the whole school is made of only one classroom, and all students are put together in this one classroom. In terms of the Brazilian students, we also have a big contrast. So at the same time that we have students that are rich and have access to computers and the internet at home or at school, some students have access to little or in fact nothing at all, like this example that I have here which is again, I mean, these are the two extremes, but we have several possibilities in the middle. How am I doing in terms of time? I think I should be going a little faster. So in terms of the English teaching scenario, we also have private and public schools. We have a system that is in fact divided in three parts. So English is mandatory in schools from the age of 11 on. So during the final years of elementary school, all students should be learning English. But English is the only mandatory foreign language. We used to have other possibilities in the past, especially Spanish, but nowadays it's an only English only system in terms of the additional languages that are possible to be taught at schools in Brazil. Public schools also, it's the same situation. English starts at the final years of elementary school when students are around 11 years old. It's an English only system. And we do have some schools that add Spanish in a few areas in Brazil, especially in around the frontiers, because all the other countries in Latin America, in South America specifically, speak Spanish, right? So in some areas of the border areas tends to have Spanish as an extra possibility for their students, both in private and public schools. We have a third parallel system that is not really made of schools, but what we call language institutes. These are not real schools because they don't teach all the possible disciplines of the curriculum. They only teach language. And this is like mostly English because this is the mandatory language in Brazil. Everybody wants to learn English. These language institutes are not free. They are students have to pay to study there. So of course, it's only for those who can afford it. They are not controlled by the Ministry of Education. There are no laws that restrict what these language institutes can do. They follow different syllabi. Some of them have most of them follow let's say course books, use course books that let's say teach American English or US English. A few of them teach British English. I don't know of any school here in my area that teaches Australian or Canadian English. It's basically US and British English, but course books nowadays are more, let's say, more diverse. We also have a system that is starting to pick up in private schools, mainly called bilingual education. So in these private schools, they offer English from the initial years of elementary school, like from a very early age for students in these schools. Also, this part of English education is not controlled by the Ministry of Education. So again, there are no laws that restrict or mandate what
I think we lost connection with Dr. Mattos. We'll try to reach her. 1 second.
I'm sorry, I think I logged off. Do you hear me again?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. So learning English is mandatory from the 6th grade on. So students are around 11. In public
Mattos,
schools,
sorry.
they may be.
We
Sorry?
can't see your presentation anymore. Sorry to
You can
interrupt.
see my screen? Yeah, I have to share it again, right?
Yes, please.
Oh my gosh. For some reason, my screen is, I can't see the sharing button.
I have your presentation. I can share my screen if that's
Yeah,
okay.
maybe it's easier and
Okay.
it won't go off again.
So yes, 1 second.
Yeah, I'm about to finish, just 2 or 3 more slides.
We were here when we lost you.
You were here?
Yes.
So where exactly?
We lost you right when we were switching to the next.
Okay, so you heard everything that I said about the bilingual education system?
Yes, we did. We did.
Okay. So basically this next slide is a summary of what I've just said. English is mandatory. English is nowadays the only mandatory language in Brazil, as I said, with a few schools also offering Spanish. Some really few schools in the south also offer German, because the south of Brazil is an area that has been colonized by German origin, people from German origin. So if you can go to the next slide, the teacher, however, is very much neglected in terms of the educational policies in Brazil. Right now, we don't have any specific educational policy that tries to enhance the quality of language teacher education in Brazil, nor anything that tries to make for better salaries in the whole area of education. The teacher is considered an item that is significantly expensive in the budget, so it's treated as a cost and not as an investment. And in English teaching, basically, that is our focus here, in fact. There are several limitations to what teachers can do. So many schools restrict what is supposed to be taught in language lessons. There are restrictions to the amount of hours of the English classes. So 99% of our schools have only one English class per week, in like 50 minutes class only. So it's really very little, and nobody can really learn a language in a 50-minute class per week, right? Teachers also, most of them don't speak English at a better level. They are mostly basic level English speakers. The curricula is fixed and homogenized. We also have a mandatory new curriculum that started in 2018 that is called BNCC. That's the basic national curricula, and it very much dictates what the content of English, and in fact all areas of the curricula in the whole country. In terms of English teaching, traditional classes that teach grammar and vocabulary only is what we find all over the country in most schools, and also very traditional evaluations. So please, if you can go to the next slide. What I have here is 3 questions that I would like you to think about. I don't have answers to these questions, but these are just things that we here try to think about, specifically in terms of research and teacher education at the level of university. So what are the consequences of these educational scenarios for the development of Brazilian society in the future? How do we, language teachers, language teacher educators, language policy makers, how do we expect these students to contribute to social reconstruction and transformation? And what Brazil or what Brazils can we think of based on the social implications of these scenarios? So in this huge and diverse country, as you've seen, how many Brazils can we think of for a future, for our future society? Okay. So yeah, that's basically that. And my next slide is just a thank you very much for staying here this morning in Brazil, afternoon in England. And this is my contact. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mattos, thank you very much. We do have a question for both Dr. Mattos and Dr. Coffey. It's from Zara Nasir. What do you think about the rising use of technology for learning languages and the way some universities are closing their language programs? How can we ensure that the traditional way of learning linguistics and languages is sustained for as long as possible?
Emilio, can you please stop sharing my screen so I can see you all?
Yes, of course. I'll stop sharing.
Sorry.
Not a problem. Here we are.
Okay.
So I will type the question into the chat box so everybody can see it.
All right.
But of course, you can feel free to answer all that.
So should I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just to mention that my colleague, as I said, Patricia, has just posted something on the chat. Thank you, Patricia, for staying with us. Yeah, well, in terms of technology, yeah, well, everybody is talking about that. That's like a buzzword, right? So as you said, as you saw, the two systems in Brazil, public and private, are very different. And we do have a lot of technology in private schools. In most private schools in Brazil, like we have here we call interactive boards instead of a blackboard or a green board or even a whiteboard, which the whiteboard is what we have at the universities nowadays. But in private schools, we have what we call interactive board, which is all technological and with full of functions. Students can work, they love it, right? But we don't have that in any public schools. Not even whiteboards are sometimes difficult to find in public schools. And as you saw in many areas of Brazil, we hardly have classrooms, let alone whiteboards or interactive boards. So technology is something that is really a problem for public schools in Brazil. Some cities are investing in that. The city of Belo Horizonte, where I live, invests a lot in technology in the municipal schools. But the state schools, which are at high school level, hardly have any technology at all. Maybe they have a computer room, but they don't have technology inside any classrooms. So technology is really rising in the country, but it still has to find a way to go into public schools, especially. And in terms of traditional ways of learning, again, this is a very problematic level, problematic issue, not only at public school, at the public school system, but also at the private schools, because there is a lot of myths in terms of how English should be taught. So basically, or how languages should be taught. I mention English because it's my area, and as I said, it's the mandatory language. But most teachers still adhere to a very traditional way of teaching in terms of, teaching the verb to be year after year, and a few vocabulary items like colors and numbers and how to introduce yourself, and basically that. So this is something that we really have to try to change, and in my view, this is a job that we have to do at the university, because we are the ones who prepare language teachers to become what they should be at schools, right? I guess that's what I have to say about this question.
Thank you very much, Professor Mattos. Professor Coffey, any comments, any insights?
Well, yes, I'd like to follow on a little bit from that. We do have more technological infrastructure here, for sure. England invested a lot compared to other European countries, and I think non-European countries as well in the main, a lot more. Right from 20 years ago, there was a huge investment in things like electronic whiteboards, the interactive whiteboards. So we do have a very sophisticated technological infrastructure. Most schools are still using pen and paper. That's a choice. Some schools are using tablets only. They're sponsored by Apple or Microsoft or something, and they're using tablets now instead of exercise books. But the more interesting question is what the impact of that is on pedagogy, which Andrea mentions is still pretty traditional, actually. So millions of pounds have been spent on installing interactive whiteboards, which are not really used interactively. They're helpful for the teacher sometimes to be able to store resources and stuff, but they're still used in quite limited ways. Despite the huge investment in technology in schools, at least, languages continue to decline. So I think languages were more taken up, not to say popular, but there were much more take up when we used to use much more non-technological methods. So the technology is there. Anyone can sign up to courses online, Duolingo. The resources are infinite now with internet. That doesn't necessarily mean that the individual is moved to avail themselves of those resources and make the most of them. So yeah, we do have a lot of technological infrastructure here, but that in a way doesn't translate into more motivated and more successful language teaching, which I think always comes down to the person feeling seen, feeling heard, the human connection of the teacher, all of those sorts of things. It really comes down to that. The other part of the question was about the universities closing their language programs. That's certainly a massive problem here in the UK. Where university departments are dropping like flies, especially in newer universities where traditionally there have been, or at least since the 1960s, there's been more focus on applied type of language courses rather than traditional literature-based courses. So we've seen a huge number of translation programs shut down, applied language shut down, newer universities because numbers are smaller. But that, I think, is part of a global issue about promotion of STEM programs over humanities. English might be sort of saved by that compared to other languages because that's seen very much now as a basic skill. What we do see relatively healthy numbers is things like our Modern Language Centre in our university, which is a service centre for people to take language courses outside or alongside, or as a sort of a supplement to their main degree programs. But academic departments focusing on language study are closing, yeah. So that problem is woven into the whole global decline in the value of arts and humanities.
Yeah, if I can just say a few words about that, because that was the part that I didn't mention. Fortunately, this is a problem that we don't have in Brazil. As I said, most universities are federal public universities, and in this sense, professors are all civil workers. We are hired by the government, so they can't just, you know, throw us out from what, you know, nights to day. So we are still here and we will resist.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mattos, Professor Coffey. We don't have any other questions from the audience. So once again, on behalf of the British Council and King's College London, I would like to thank you all very much, especially Dr. Coffey, Dr. Mattos, for being with us today. It was a very enlightening and resourceful conversation. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being patient with us today.
Thank you again for inviting me, and I hope we can continue this conversation in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you very much to the British Council, and a huge thank you to you, Andrea. Lovely to have that dialogue with you. Yeah, we'll continue. Bye for now.